She called me 5 months after Marcus, and I ended. Not to check on me, not to talk about the breakup. She called to tell me that her relationship was falling apart and that it was somehow our fault. Her name was Lena. She and Jamie had been together for 3 years. They had found each other at a party Marcus, and I threw in our apartment the winter we had been together for 18 months. I remember that night clearly, the specific way Jamie looked at Lena across our kitchen, and the specific way she pretended not to notice. Marcus and I had nudged them toward each other deliberately, and watched it work in real time, and felt the particular quiet joy of two people who love each other wanting that same thing for someone else. 3 years later, Lena was on the phone telling me that the model they had built their relationship on had just collapsed, and that we were the model. I did not know what to do with that. I still do not know entirely. My name is Kendall. I am 31 years old. I am a graphic designer. I am the person in any group who organizes the gatherings, remembers the birthdays, makes the reservations, and sends the follow-up text to make sure everyone actually shows up. I am the person who believed completely, genuinely, without a single doubt, that the community Marcus and I had spent 4 years building together was the most permanent thing in my life. I was wrong about that. Marcus and I ended on a Tuesday in October. Mutual. Adult. No betrayal, no explosion, no single moment anyone could point to. Just two people who had loved each other genuinely and completely arriving at the same honest conclusion at the same time, that the people they were becoming were not growing in the same direction anymore. We cried. We were kind to each other. We divided the practical things carefully and without cruelty. What we did not divide, what we did not even think to discuss, was the people. I want to ask you something before I go any further. When your last relationship ended, did you lose people alongside losing the person, not just the partner, the whole world you had built together? The group chats, the game nights, the friends who came as a set, the entire social architecture you had spent years constructing together. If that has ever happened to you, I need you to stay, because this story is for you, and I need you to tell me about it in the comments when this is over, because nobody talks about this part of a breakup. The part where you lose a community alongside losing a person. The part where the damage travels further than you ever expected. Nobody talks about it. Someone should. Marcus and I knew we would have to split the furniture and the streaming passwords and the dog's Tuesday walking schedule. What we did not know was that we would also have to split the people. And what neither of us knew, what I did not discover until Lena called me 5 months later, was that splitting the people was only the beginning of how far the damage actually reached. Let me take you back to what we built. Because you need to understand what it was before you can understand what it cost us to lose it. Marcus and I did not set out to become the center of anything. It just happened the way those things happen, gradually, naturally, through the accumulation of small, consistent choices to show up for the people around us until showing up became the thing we were known for. Our apartment was the apartment everyone defaulted to. Our game nights were the ones nobody missed. Our group chat was the one that never went quiet. There were 6 of us at the core. Marcus and me. Ryan and Sophie. Ryan had been Marcus's closest friend since college. Sophie had come into the group 2 years before I did and had become the person I texted about everything. And Jamie and Lena, who found each other at our apartment and who told the story of that night at every dinner for 3 years afterward like it was the origin story of something they wanted to remember correctly. We had rituals the way families have rituals. Game night every Saturday at Ryan and Sophie's, the same rotating roster of board games, the same arguments about the rules, the same order of who brought what. A group chat called something only the 6 of us would understand that generated so many messages a day I had to silence it just to function at work. An annual camping trip, the last weekend of August that nobody had missed in 4 years. The specific way this group showed up for each other in the harder moments. Ryan driving 2 hours in the middle of the night when Marcus's father was hospitalized. Sophie sitting with me on my bathroom floor the night a pregnancy scare turned out to be nothing. Jamie and Lena showing up with groceries and no questions asked when Marcus and I had a week where everything felt like too much. This was not a friend group. This was a chosen family. And like most families, we never once sat down and asked what would happen to the structure if the foundation shifted. The last game night before Marcus, and I told anyone, was the best one we ever had. Jamie won 3 rounds of everything. Lena cried, laughing so hard she spilled her wine on Ryan's carpet. We all helped clean it up, and it was so perfectly ordinary I remember thinking, whatever happens between Marcus and me, at least we will always have this. I believed that completely. I had no idea I was looking at the last night of something I would spend the next year trying to understand how to grieve. 6 weeks after the breakup, Marcus sent a box of my remaining things. Practical items, a charger, 3 books, a jacket I had left draped over his desk chair so many times it had stopped feeling like mine and started feeling like part of his apartment. Small accumulated evidence of 4 years spent in each other's spaces, gathered now into a single cardboard box delivered to my door on a Wednesday afternoon. I opened it on my kitchen floor. Near the bottom, a printed photograph, 4 inches by 6, the camping trip from last August, the last one I attended as half of Kendall and Marcus. Marcus had included it without thinking. It was on his shelf mixed in with some of my books. He did not register what it would mean for me to receive it now. I picked it up and looked at it. The entire group, Ryan and Sophie, Jamie and Lena, Marcus, 2 friends from the outer edge of the circle, standing at the campsite in late afternoon light. Everyone laughing at something outside the frame. I am in it, standing between Sophie and Marcus with my arm around her shoulder and my head tilted back mid-laugh. I am completely present in this photograph. I am also completely gone from the version of this group that exists right now. Both of those things were true simultaneously. I did not know how to hold them both at once, so I just sat on my kitchen floor and kept looking at the photograph until my legs went numb from the cold tile. I placed it on the kitchen counter when I finally stood up. 3 days later, the camping trip was announced in the group chat. Same weekend as always. Same location. My name was not in the planning thread. Not because anyone made a decision to exclude me, just because I was no longer in the natural assumption of who was going. The photograph on my counter suddenly had a second meaning. It was not just a record of who I had been. It was a preview of what the next photograph from this trip would look like. Same campsite, same people, same late afternoon light. Different absence. I did not go. I found out it happened through an Instagram story 3 weeks later. I looked at that story for a long time. Then I looked at the photograph on my counter, and I understood that the group I had helped build had already quietly figured out how to exist without me. It had just taken me a little longer to figure out the same thing about them. When Marcus and I told the group, nobody said they were choosing sides. They meant it. I want to be clear about that. Nobody in that circle was being deliberately cruel. Nobody sat down and made a conscious decision about where their loyalty lived. They just kept making small, unremarkable choices that accumulated quietly over weeks until the accumulation became a reality nobody had formally decided on, but nobody could undo either. Ryan and Marcus had been friends since before I existed in either of their lives. That was not a decision Ryan made after the breakup. It was gravity operating on a condition that had always been there, a 14-year friendship that predated me by a decade and would outlast our relationship without requiring anyone to choose it. I understood that. I had always understood that. Sophie was harder. Sophie was my person in that group, the one I texted about everything, the one I thought would be the friendship that survived regardless of what happened with Marcus. But Sophie lived with Ryan. She woke up next to Ryan every morning. She had Sunday coffee with Ryan at the kitchen table. Maintaining a strong, independent friendship with me would have required her to actively navigate against the path of least resistance every single day. She loved me. She also loved her life with Ryan more than she loved making things complicated. I do not blame her. I have spent a long time making sure I genuinely do not blame her. 3 months after the breakup, she called after the camping trip photo appeared on Instagram. Warm, apologetic, full of genuine guilt. She said, "It just kind of came together last minute. You know how it is." I told her I understood. After the call, I sat with one specific realization. Sophie had called to manage her own guilt, not to repair the friendship. The difference between those two things is everything. That was the last real conversation we had, not because either of us decided it would be, just because after that call there was nothing left between us that felt safe to say. 3 months later, I ran into Jamie at a grocery store. 8 minutes in the cereal aisle. Before he left, he said, "We miss you. It's just complicated." I nodded. I watched him walk away and stood there long after he was gone. Complicated. That was the word people used when they had already made a choice they did not want to say out loud. The group chat did not go silent all at once. It went quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone leaves, gradually, in stages, the specific noise of a place adjusting to an absence it has not yet learned to name. 100 messages a day became 40. 40 became 12. 12 became nothing with long stretches in between that were no longer lulls, but migrations. The same people talking somewhere else, in a chat I was not in. The evidence visible in the fact that nobody was posting here anymore because they had somewhere better to be. I know how that sounds. A phone screen going quiet, not a real loss, not something worth grieving. I am telling you it was both of those things. The group chat had been the daily proof that I belonged somewhere. Without it, I was not just lonely. I was socially unlocated, floating in a specific directionless way that had no language and no ritual and no social permission to be taken seriously. I picked up my phone by reflex 40 times a day, opened the chat, found the silence, put the phone down, repeated. For 6 weeks I did that. Then Lena called. I told you about this call in the first minutes of this story. Now you have the full context to understand what it meant. 5 months after the breakup, her voice careful and quiet. Jamie and she were struggling, not from anything dramatic, just the specific destabilization of two people who had built their relationship using Marcus and me as the blueprint, and were now standing in front of a collapsed blueprint, asking each other whether what they had built was real, or whether it had always just been a reflection of someone else's love story. "If you and Marcus couldn't figure it out," she said, "maybe we've just been doing a version of you and Marcus this whole time." I sat with those words for a long time. I had lost my relationship. I had lost my community. And now I understood that my relationship's failure had become structural damage inside someone else's love story without my knowledge and without my consent. I picked up the photograph from the counter that night, looked at it one last time. Then I put it in a drawer. Not to forget it, just because I had finally finished looking at it. 1 year later, the camping trip photos appeared on Instagram again. Same campsite, same late afternoon light, same group of people laughing at something outside the frame. I looked at them the way you look at something that used to hurt and now just exists, with a specific quiet recognition that the acute part is over, and what remains is simply the permanent shape of what happened. I felt something looking at those photos. I want to be honest about that. But it was not the grief of year one. It was something quieter. The particular settled feeling of a wound that has finished being a wound and become a scar. Scars do not hurt the way wounds do. They just remind you that something real occurred and that you were substantial enough to heal around it. My social world is smaller now. I am not going to dress that up or package it into something more comfortable than it is. The camping trip still happens without me. The group chat I was part of for 4 years still exists somewhere. On Ryan's phone, on Sophie's phone, on phones I no longer have access to. Game night still happens on Saturdays. I am not part of any of it, and I have stopped waiting to be. What I have instead, I built slowly and specifically over 12 months. 2 friendships that survived the fallout completely intact, built on foundations that existed independently of Marcus, independently of the group, independently of any relationship that could dissolve and take them with it. A friendship with Claire, who I met at a design conference 4 months after the breakup, who knew me only as Kendall and had no version of Kendall and Marcus to compare me against. And Lena, who called me that night about Jamie, who is still with Jamie and still working on it, who became a genuine friendship rather than a group-adjacent acquaintance, because crisis has a way of stripping away the performance and leaving only what is actually real. These are smaller numbers than I had before. I know that. But every person in my life right now chose me specifically, not as part of a set, not because I came attached to someone they already loved. Just me, Kendall, the graphic designer who organizes the gatherings and remembers the birthdays and still makes the reservations even when the guest list is shorter than it used to be. I have learned something in this year that I could not have learned any other way. Community built around a relationship is only as stable as the relationship itself. I did not know that when Marcus and I were building ours. I do not think most people know it while they are building theirs. You construct an entire social architecture around the assumption of permanence. The game nights, the group chats, the annual trips, and you never once ask what the structure looks like if the foundation shifts. I am asking that question now, about everything I build going forward. And here is what I want to leave you with, not as advice, just as the truth I am still living. If you have ever lost a community alongside losing a person, if you have ever watched a group chat go silent and understood that the silence was not a pause but a migration, I want you to know that what you lost was real. The grief of that is real. You are allowed to grieve it with the same seriousness you give to every other kind of loss. But I also want you to know this. The friendships that survive a fallout are the ones that were never held together by proximity or convenience or the gravitational pull of someone else's relationship. They are the ones that chose you on their own. And those friendships, smaller, quieter, more specific, are the ones worth building everything else around. Start there. On the first anniversary of the breakup, I received a text from Sophie. The first real one in 11 months. No apology, no explanation, just 7 words. I've been thinking about you. I hope you're okay. I read it twice. I set my phone down on the table next to the drawer where the photograph lives. I looked at the drawer for a long moment. Then I looked back at my phone. I have not decided yet whether to answer. If this story found the part of you that needed to hear it, tell me in the comments. Did you lose people when you lost a partner? Did your whole world reorganize itself around an absence you were not prepared for? Say it out loud. You are not the only one, and this is a safe place to say it. I read every single comment.